Welcome to HEAR 120, March 27th. I had to look at the calendar there. 2018. Anatomy. Anatomy and physiology of the inner ear, likely to be the fourth and final week we are spending on this particular unit. All righty then. Looking at this particular unit, I think we spent last week as a real thorough review of everything from stem to stern, A to Z, well, we shall see, and we covered all kinds of stuff in our notes. Today we want to finish that, and today we're finishing it with coverage mainly so you get a preview of some disorders of the ear as well, of the inner ear. Now that's the wrong one to push. That one there was my email. I don't know why I pushed that one. Here you go. So this is what you want, okay? So when we're looking at our notes, scrolling all the way to the top, inner ear physiology, looking at the traveling wave, the vertical motions and horizontal motions in the cochlea, then looking at traveling waves versus sound waves, traveling waves being transverse waves and sound waves being longitudinal waves. Then we looked at the asymmetrical traveling wave in and of itself, shaped like a kite, making low frequencies mask highs better than highs masking lows, upward spread of masking, the shearing action of the hair cells, and so basically the cochlea doing two transductions, middle ear changing sound waves, longitudinal waves into mechanical piston-like energy, then the cochlea taking that mechanical piston-like energy and transducing or changing that into traveling wave hydraulic energy, transverse wave now as opposed to longitudinal, and then the hair cells taking that wave and changing that or transducing it into electricity. So I told you not to worry about depolarization and hyperpolarization, all good. Traveling wave and the twofold role of outer hair cells, okay, right here. They amplify sounds below 50 dB and they sharpen the traveling wave. So I should say they amplify the traveling wave for sounds that activate the cochlea. And they amplify that especially for soft sounds. They sharpen the wave. And then as a result, they create otoacoustic emissions. OAEs, a byproduct of the outer hair cells working their tails off, doing that twofold action of sharpening the peak of the traveling wave and amplifying the peak of the traveling wave, okay? So the amplification especially takes place for soft incoming sounds below 50 dB and the sharpening thereof as well. So when you've got the sharpening of the traveling wave, you have increased frequency resolution. And when you're thinking about what we looked at this morning in 110, in acoustics and psychoacoustics, Unit 4, psychoacoustics, and we talked about just noticeable difference for frequency. Remember that? And we said when you've got hair cell damage in the inner ear, you've lost the ability to distinguish between frequencies close together. And of course, the loss of frequency resolution is because the traveling wave itself is no longer sharpened. Instead of having an active traveling wave, you now have a passive traveling wave. So this person can distinguish between frequencies close together as you look at my cursor. This person cannot. Okay? The difference Lyman, or just noticeable difference for frequencies close together, the differential threshold is poorer. Bigger changes are needed in order to notice that there's a change in frequency. So the frequency resolution has gone down. So the outer hair cells doing the twofold action of sharpening and amplifying the peak of the traveling wave. Sharpening and amplifying the peak of the traveling wave, as you can see right there, okay? And again, what would happen to a person if you've unrolled the cochlea and two frequencies close together, two traveling waves, easily distinguishable from each other. The middle panel, loss of outer hair cells. You've lost the sharpening. You've lost the increased height or amplitude. And now when you take hearing aids and put it on this person, you've got the bottom panel. You've restored the size of the wave, but the sharpening is gone. Always remember, hearing aids have a twofold task. They need to increase gain for the hearing loss, like duh. They need to make sounds louder. But secondly, they have to try and increase the signal to noise ratio, increase the level of speech compared to the level of noise, so that the person with the damaged hair cells can, C-A-N, separate the frequencies, speech from background noise. You see, this person on top can. He's got good frequency resolution. This person here cannot, even when amplified. The bottom panel. You see that? So he needs to, for this person, increasing amplification is only half the story. You need to increase the signal, speech to noise ratio. All right. So all of that due to the loss of frequency resolution. Now the outer hair cells do all of that stuff, the sharpening of the peaks. Okay, that sharpening of the peaks does not come without a cost, and that cost is otoacoustic emissions. The ear working in reverse. And these are used by audiologists for infant hearing screening. It's like the probe tip, similar to what you will learn about in audiometry class, tympanometry. Only you're not checking the middle ear function, you're checking otoacoustic emissions. A tight, airtight seal isn't necessary, but you want to block out the noise. And avoid blocking the probe with the ear canal wall. What you're doing here is you're looking closely at the brain stem on your left, olivocochlear bundle communicating with the outer hair cells, eighth nerve communicating with the inner hair cells. Look at the direction of the arrows. Afferent, brain going, efferent, from brain back to the body. Okay? So, this being the innervation pattern, what you're doing with otoacoustic emissions is you're putting a probe in the ear canal and you are emitting frequencies and you're looking for a backward traveling wave. Follow my cursor, going out. Instead of moving from the base to the apex, it's moving backwards, hitting the oval window, wiggling the incus, wiggling the malleus, and now the eardrum is acting like a speaker. So you're putting two tones in the ear and a third one's coming back out of the ear. They call it distortion product otoacoustic emissions, DPOAE. Speaker 1 and speaker 2 and a mic. So the probe that you saw here has 3 holes in it. The probe that you're seeing here has 3 holes in it. Okay, one for a speaker, one for another speaker, and another one for a microphone. So one frequency is coming out of this speaker, one's coming out of this speaker. Look at the red arrows going through the ear canal, through the middle ear, into the cochlea, or activating a cochlea, I should say, because sound waves don't enter a cochlea. And then a third sound now coming out. That's your otoacoustic emission being picked up by the mic. Think of OAEs like sweat from hard work. Sweat is a byproduct of working your butt off. Put your hand against the light bulb and feel the warmth. The heat is a byproduct of the light bulb. The light bulb's job is mainly to provide light, but a byproduct is heat. And think of OAEs as a byproduct of the outer hair cells working their tails off to amplify and sharpen the traveling wave. So what they do is they put in 2 tones. If you're looking here, you can see the noise floor inside the ear canal. Okay, very soft. And they'll put in 1 tone and a second tone, and a third one comes out. That's your otoacoustic emission. Here too, 1 tone and another tone coming into the ear, your otoacoustic emission coming out. Now the 2 tones are usually split by a ratio, okay? And you don't have to know this really, but I'm just telling you for the sheer fun of it. They've experimented a lot. If 1,000 hertz comes out of the first speaker, the other tones needs to be a ratio of 1 to 1.22. 1 to 1.22. So if tone 1 is 1,000 hertz, tone 2 is 1,220 hertz, or 1,220 hertz. They need to be separated by that ratio. And then if another tone of 2,000 hertz is coming out, then you're going to have 2,440 be the other tone. The ratio is always 1 to 1.2, 1.22. Anyway, the tone that comes out is always 2F1 minus F2. So if you put a 1,000 hertz tone and a 1,220 hertz tone into the ear, F1 and F2, the tone that comes out is 2F1, which means 2,000, 2 times 1,000, minus F2, which is 1,220. So 2,000 minus 1,220 is 780 hertz. So that's the tone that's going to be coming out. And that's the relationship always. These two frequencies separated by a ratio of 1 to 1.22, and then the tone that comes out is 2F1 minus F2. In this case, 2,500. So what they're doing with OAEs is they're playing pairs of tones surrounding 250, surrounding 500, surrounding 750, surrounding 1,000, surrounding 1,500. And they're looking for that third tone to come out each time. Okay? That's otoacoustic emissions. Really cool. One of the coolest tests around. It's a non-behavioral test of outer hair cell function. So here's, excuse me, many years ago, my hearing test. Look at my X's and O's, okay? Meaning I had really good hearing for my low frequencies, going to my mid frequencies, and then the very highs, I start to lose a little bit of hearing. Okay, here's my otoacoustic emissions. Now I'm no longer 41, okay, but we'll just pretend. So here's the noise floor in my ear canal in light green, and see how it's minus 10 dB SPL? Look at that. See, you can have sounds that are less than 0 SPL, okay? Remember, 0 dB SPL is just the softest it takes to hear a 1,000 hertz tone at 1 meter distance from a speaker with 2 ears. Shoot, when you have a probe tube in your ear canal, now you're sealing everything off. It's really quiet in there. Anyway, the otoacoustic emission amplitude is in red. And you can see it's at least 20 dB above the noise floor. And so I've got them all the way from hair cells representing where my cursor is, up until you get just past 4,000 hertz. Then all of a sudden, bloop, they drop. Well, sure enough, bloop, they drop. Okay? So my otoacoustic emissions are saying, hey man, you're losing some outer hair cells way past 4,000 hertz. You're losing hair cells. You're going to get presbycusis. You're going to get hearing loss. Well, I guess so. I'm human. All right? So anyway, that's OAEs, and let's look in our notes. What do we have there? What does it say? A byproduct of the outer hair cells working their tails off. They provide a view into the otherwise inaccessible cochlea, like hearing in reverse. They exit the oval window to the middle ear ossicles, and the TM acts like a speaker. They are non-behavioral. Very useful for testing hearing in infants. By non-behavioral, it means non-voluntary. They just happen, okay? So useful in testing hearing in infants and others who cannot respond voluntarily, or in liars, malingerers. So when specific sounds are put into the ear, another sound, about 10 to 20 dB, comes out. They are distortion products, and they illustrate that the cochlea is a nonlinear system. In other words, it amplifies. Outer hair cells make the cochlea nonlinear. Compression. What does that mean? They work at certain intensities, and then they don't at other intensities. The outer hair cells are amplifying what sounds? Soft sounds. Outer hair cells aren't playing any part with 80 dB SPL sounds coming to the ear. They only play a part with 10, 20, 30, 40 soft sounds. It's for those sounds that they amplify the traveling wave. Okay? Now this has lots to do with hearing aids. You can see what I'm graying out here. It's called wide dynamic range compression. This is used in hearing aids today, and it's done to imitate the role of outer hair cells. It's used in all your hearing aids today. It amplifies soft sounds by a lot. In other words, hearing aids today amplify soft sounds by a lot, and they amplify loud sounds by little or nothing at all. That, by the way, is why hearing aids cost so darn much. Okay? Think of an amplifier that's constantly changing the amount it's amplifying. I mean, when you turn on your radio or TV, you set the volume, and then you're done. But think of a TV or radio that when you back away further from the radio, it automatically gets louder. And as you come toward the radio, it automatically gets softer. That's what hearing aids are doing. They're amplifying soft sounds by more of a degree than they're amplifying loud sounds. So if you're talking loudly into a hearing aid, it's backing off. And if you speak really softly into a hearing aid, it's working its ass off, its tail off. Okay? It's trying to imitate outer hair cells. It's an electronic imitation of outer hair cells. So, amplify soft sounds by a lot and loud sounds by little or nothing at all. However, with outer hair cell damage, the traveling wave is smaller and rounded, so hearing aids can only make sounds louder but not clearer. Hearing aids cannot sharpen the peak of that traveling wave. That's gone for good. Okay? But hearing aids can, C-A-N, focus on soft sounds, just like outer hair cells do. So here's a picture of it. This is a very, very common picture you're commonly going to see in our field. Okay? I'll show it to you here. Yeah, it disappeared on me for a while. Scared the heck out of me. Weird. So here you go. Look at the situation here. Look at the axes carefully. First, the horizontal decibels. You can call it dBHL. Why not? Let's just call it dBHL because we talked about that this morning in 110. But if you want, you can call it dBSPL. Still, same picture. What's the vertical axis? Psychoacoustics, your perception of intensity. Okay, so here you have on the horizontal, physical intensity, and here you have on the vertical, perception of intensity. Now look at the red 45-degree angle line. The red line is normal hearing. So for normal hearing, 10 decibels is soft. 30 decibels is soft. 10 is very soft. 30 is soft. 50 to 60 is comfortable. And 90 to 100 is too loud. Now look what happens with outer hair cell damage. Now you're looking at the blue line. Now you can't hear sounds below 50 because that's what the outer hair cells help the inner hair cells sense. So if the outer hair cells are gone, you'll have about a 50 decibel hearing loss. So now you can't hear sounds till they're 50 or 60. Now those are going to sound very soft. And yet 90 to 100 is going to sound too loud. Do you see the point where the lines meet? That's called recruitment. Write that down. Recruit. R-E-C-R-U-I-T-M-E-N-T. Recruitment. It means that loud or intense inputs are heard just as loud by normal hearing people and those with sensory neural loss. Now, this person's got mild to moderate sensory neural loss, so look what the hearing aid has to do for him. Got to amplify soft sounds by a lot, average sounds by less, and louder sounds by little or nothing at all. Do you see? Outer hair cells are trying, hearing aids today are trying to imitate what the outer hair cells used to do. Okay? Wide dynamic range compression. And I'm going to show it to you with my hands. It's not wide dynamic, this is the floor of hearing, and this is your loudness tolerance. It's not wide dynamic range compression. It's this hand staying here, wide dynamic range compression. Okay, in other words, the soft sounds are no longer audible, average sounds are audible, loud sounds are just as loud as to a normal hearing person. So what's happened with hearing loss is I used to hear at 0 and could tolerate up to 100. Now I can't hear till 50, and I can tolerate up to 100. The floor went up, the ceiling of loudness tolerance didn't change. That's what hearing loss is. Deafness is when the floor of hearing loss meets the ceiling. So I can't hear anything, and as soon as I do hear it, it hurts. So I have no dynamic range. Dynamic range is the decibel distance between the softest you can hear and the loudest you can tolerate. A normal dynamic range is around 100 decibels. But if I've got hearing loss, I've got a shrunken dynamic range. Now I can't hear till 50, and yet the ceiling is too loud. It's like instead of standing on the floor with your feet on the ground and the ceiling up there, now I'm standing on my desk and the ceiling hasn't changed. Okay? That's how you think about hearing loss and deafness. So, there we go. Wide dynamic range compression. Here's another way of looking at it. Here's a hearing loss on an audiogram. Right ear. Good hearing in the low frequencies, not many decibels required. Hearing loss in the high frequencies. This is dBHL that we talked about in acoustics this morning. Move to the right-hand side and you'll see dBSPL. And the bottom blue line, minimal audible pressure, MAP. This blue curve is, capital letters, IS, underline, bold-faced, italics, is 0, dBHL, where my cursor is. Okay, so this curved line in dBSPL is the flat line at the top of the audiogram. And as we said this morning in 110, your audiometers need to be calibrated to have these decibel differences across this curve built in. So that 0 dBs at 250 hertz is really around 20. And 0 dB HL at 500 hertz is really about 10. And 0 dB at 1,000 hertz is really about 5, if you know that. If y'all are catching my drift. So this is basically what outer hair cells are doing. Input sound levels, soft inputs, the outer hair cells are amplifying, 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 amplifying. A dead cochlea or a cochlea without outer hair cells can't hear until, say, 60. And now you've got the situation. But this is a rather intellectual slide. Fear not. Don't worry about it. Here's the sharpening of a traveling wave peak again, that active increase in gain or amplitude plus the sharpening taking place. So let's talk about disorders of the ear. But I think we've nicely summarized what the cochlea is doing. I'll let you read this stuff, but don't freak about it. Basilar membrane velocity, blah, blah, blah. I focus the one on the left here. The sharpening of the wave, the twofold action, amplification and sharpening. Very important concepts to have in mind, because really this is why your clients and hearing aids are going to mix like oil and water. And this is why our field is so radically different from optometry. Optometry is basically dealing with a problem of light getting to the back of the eye called the retina. Wear these and everything's good. Okay, you're refocusing light properly upon an intact retina. Well, the retina of the ears is the hair cells. And 95% of hearing loss is damage to the hair cells. So here's the most common hearing loss in the world, presbycusis. Now, if I can get rid of the air, go away. Presbycusis. Looks a lot like the word Presbyterian. Well, Presbyterian means Church of the Elders, as opposed to the deacons or the bishops, okay? Presby is the Greek word for elder. Presbyopia means your arms aren't long enough to see the page. Presbyopia hits you when you're 40. Presbyopia means you can't see things close up. You can see far away, but you can't see close up. Presbycusis is trouble hearing treble. Look at this person. The X's and O's. X's are the left ear, O's are the right ear. Look at how many decibels are required for this guy to hear 125 hertz. 5. 250, around 10. 500, around 20. 1,000, around 30. 2,000 around 40. So you can see that as you get higher up in frequency, the hearing loss gets worse and worse. More and more decibels are required for the person to just barely hear the tones. Now these little greater than signs, if you're looking at these, that means you took the headphones off the ear, you took those off, and you had a little headband, and it sat around, and you had a square box. Now feel with the bone behind your ear. And I'll use this little rock here. I'll pretend here I got a little rock. And that box is sitting right on that bone. Now that bone is called your mastoid bone. And there's a headband going from that little box sitting here, and that headband goes across like so. Now you're delivering tones through that headband, through the box, and the box is sitting on the mastoid bone. And look, when you delivered the tones and you avoided the outer ear and you bypassed the middle ear, in other words, you're not sending sounds through the headphone, now you're bypassing the outer ear and you're bypassing the middle ear, and you're sending sound straight through to the cochlea. And I'm going to show it to you close up again. Not a headphone here, not a headphone in here. I'm bypassing and I'm sending the sound straight through the bone to the inner ear and cochlea. And look what happened when we did that. When we did that, the hearing wasn't any better. It was the same. Okay? Didn't get any better. So that means there's nothing wrong with the outer ear, and there's nothing wrong with the middle ear. Because when I bypass those two, the hearing is the same. So the hearing loss is sensory neural. Sensory, S-E-N-S-O-R-I, sensory-neural. Sensory is kind of outer hair cell related. Neural is kind of inner hair cell related. So we just join the two together to just call it hair cell. Okay, sensory neural. In this case, the person's loss is mild to moderate in degree. It's only about a 50% hearing loss. So this person can hear without his hearing aids. He just has trouble in background noise. But one-on-one, he can hear you pretty good. Okay? And this is the kind of person that says, young people mumble today. Well, no wonder he says the young people mumble today. Where's his hearing loss? In the treble. He's got trouble hearing treble. And when you can't hear treble, you can't hear the letter S. Consonants. You can't hear the high frequency consonants. And the added resonance of your ear canal as an quarter wave resonator that I showed you this morning in 110. Sorry, it's not going to help you anymore, okay? Because your hearing loss is more than that. So you need amplification. But the trouble is the person not wearing the hearing aids is saying young people mumble today. He's basically saying, that's how he's hearing. He's not hearing the high pitches of speech. So he can't tell the difference between kittens and mittens, dishes or fishes, okay? He's always got to be following the context. Hat, fat, cat, sat, bat. He's hearing can't hear. All right? Trouble hearing treble. Presbycusis, the most common hearing loss in the world. Here's the second most common hearing loss in the world. Noise-induced. Noise-induced hearing loss has a really weird shape. Unlike this, it looks very, very normal, and all of a sudden, thunk, down at 4,000 hertz. It is just like a rat came in like a thief in the night and took a bite out of your hearing. And look, the hearing is normal again at 8,000 hertz. It gets better. But just here, it's gone. That's an earmark, so to speak, of noise-induced hearing loss. Now, the sad thing about noise-induced hearing loss is it can hit you at any age. When does presbycusis hit, by the way? Age 65. Around 65, if people start getting presbycusis. All right? Noise-induced hearing loss can be found in young people, I remember testing two brothers in Tucson, Arizona. One was 16, one was 17. One had this hearing loss in one ear, the other had this hearing loss in the other ear. I said, is one of you right-handed and one of you left-handed? They said, yeah, how did you know? I said, I bet you both do target practice, don't you? One of you holds the rifle like this, the other one holds the rifle like this. So if you're holding the rifle like this, which ear is getting the loud sound? The left ear. If you're right-handed, you'll have more hearing loss in the left ear. Left-handed, more hearing loss in the right ear. Weird but true, okay? Truck drivers will have more hearing loss in the left ear because the window on the left side is usually cranked open. Dentists may have more hearing loss in one ear than the other as well. More exposure to the drill sound, whichever. Noise-induced hearing loss is rather sad because it's preventable. That's the strange thing about noise-induced loss. And why is it that it has a bite out like that? The reason why? The outer ear canal resonance. You're getting that extra 20 decibels. And what does it say on the left? Noise tends to damage hair cells about 1/2 an octave higher than the peak of the outer ear canal resonance. Well, if all noise is coming in to your ear, and it's a broadband noise, it's got lots of lows, mids, and highs, it's getting filtered through here. And so these frequencies are going to be given an extra 20 dB. And noise tends to damage hair cells about 1/2 an octave higher than the peak of the outer ear canal resonance. So if you move this, shift it up 1/2 an octave and turn it upside down, you've got this. The reason for the shape of noise-induced loss is the shape of the outer ear canal resonance. Now here's noise-induced loss. Again, you can see it here and here. Okay, looking at noise-induced loss in this little inset. And now they're looking at hair cell damage along the basilar membrane. So you've unrolled the cochlea to be 1 inch long, and you're looking at the apex on the left and the base on the right. And look at that, you have a row of inner hair cells, and then you have your rows of outer hair cells. Look where the damage is. Okay, in the high frequency region. Here's a hunter, a right-handed hunter who died, and they looked at his or her ears, and they looked at the cochleas. The right-handed hunter had most hair cell damage toward the base of the left ear cochlea, had less hair cell damage to the base of the right ear cochlea. Okay, so this is the high frequency region, low frequency region. Okay, the person was 72 years old. Nonetheless, you could see that most of the hair cell damage on the bottom right here occurred near the base of the cochlea, the fat end of the cochlea, where the high frequency hair cells are. Now, another type of hearing loss is called Meniere's disease. Now, Meniere, if I move this guy over here, move it away, good, M-E-N-I-E-R-E''S, Meniere's disease, named after a French doctor named Prosper Meniere. Now, Meniere's disease, look at it. It's usually unilateral, okay, one ear, and it's a rising hearing loss. Now, rising hearing losses are rather unusual. Most people have treble hearing loss, okay? Trouble hearing treble. But low frequency hearing loss with normal high frequency hearing is less common. Now look, the X's are indicating normal hearing for the left ear. The O's are indicating a moderate degree of low frequency hearing loss for the right ear, rising to nearly normal hearing in the high frequencies. Look at these backward hatch marks. They basically represent how the right ear was hearing by bone conduction again, okay? Here too, bone conduction. These greater than, see, bone conduction, bone conduction. That means you took that thing and you put it on the mastoid bone. So we test hearing by air conduction with a headphone and by bone conduction, and we compare the hearing. Now, if you had a child, okay, come in for a hearing test, the child had otitis media. Do you remember me talking about otitis media before the midterm? Middle ear infection. Now that kid would have, if you looked at my cursor here, would have a flat hearing loss all the way from, let's say, about 50 to 60. It would be all the way across. We call it flat because it would be similar. The decibels required for the child to just barely hear all the different tones would be roughly the same all the way across the frequencies, because an ear infection is going to act like a plug in the ear, basically. And that's called a conductive hearing loss. Okay? It's due to a middle ear infection. So the pus is acting like a plug. So all frequencies are blocked similarly. So the child will have about a 50 decibel hearing loss by air conduction. But if you take off the headphones off the child and you take the bone oscillator and you put that on the mastoid bone and you test his hearing like that, his hearing is going to be like a baby. He's going to hear beautifully. In other words, if we go back to our screen here, follow my cursor, the X's and O's are going to be where my cursor is. Flat, 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 flat. Bone conduction up here. So you'll say, hey, you had a big hearing loss when I tried to present tones through a headphone, you had a problem. But when I bypassed the outer ear and the middle ear and sent the sound straight to the cochlea, you had normal hearing. That means your hair cells are working fine. You just have a blockage of sound getting to that cochlea. You have a conductive hearing loss. And conduction just means to carry something through. A wire conducts electricity, okay? The ear conducts sound. So you have a blockage in the conduction of sound, a conductive hearing loss. It's mechanical. You can fix it. So conductive hearing loss can be remedied by medicine. Sensory neural hair cell damage can't. Okay, so the third type of hearing loss that we're covering just now here to give you an introduction is Meniere's disease. Now this is caused by too much endolymph fluid in the scala media. Too much endolymph fluid in the scala media. Now if I hit escape here, and we go up and take a look inside. Let's see, scala media. Let's look at the scala media. Okay, here. Scala vestibula, scala vestibuli, scala media, scala tympani. Scala vestibuli, scala media, scala tympani. Scala vestibuli, scala media, scala tympani. Too much fluid in the scala media. So follow my cursor here and now look at my cheeks. Okay, so the scala media is bulging. And what else is happening? Well, let's look at that scala media. What's this membrane called? Reissner's membrane. What's this membrane called? Basilar membrane. What do you call this labyrinth? Membranous labyrinth. What do you call this and this? Bony labyrinth, right? So the walls are solid bone. Walls are solid bone. Here the walls are membranes. So when you've got excess fluid, the membranes bulge. And what else did we say in anatomy class? And earlier, I should say, oh boy, I hate it when this thing does this. Ah, good, okay. What else did we say in anatomy? Let's just go back. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to open it up. Oh, there's my emails. Okay, so let's go to here, and let's pull up the anatomy slide, just so you see. I really want you to see this, and then you'll understand Meniere's a little better. We got time. We're good. We got 20 minutes. So pull up slowly. Ah, righty then. Good. Carry on down. Here you go. Notice how the scala media gets bigger and bigger as you go toward the apex. Same was shown this way. Scala media gets wider and wider as you get to the top. Just like you saw in this slide here, or this particular presentation here, look at the basilar membrane. Narrower at the base, wider at the apex. Good. Keep that in your minds, because now we're going to be talking Meniere's. So we go almost all the way down to the end, not quite. Oh yeah, right here. Okay. So all I've done in this slide is I've laid out a basilar membrane over the top of the audiogram in orange. Okay, the base of the cochlea, the basilar membrane is narrowest. Apex of the cochlea, it's widest. And again, one row of inner hair cells here where you're following my cursor. 3 rows of outer hair cells here, 4 rows of outer hair cells here, 5 rows of outer hair cells here, right? Now read with me what it says at the top. The apical basilar membrane has more mass and it's less stiff. The basal basilar membrane has less mass and it's more stiff. So, buttons and become a tailor. So, if you add more fluid to the endolymph, which walls are going to bulge? Those who indulge bulge. Which walls are going to bulge? The walls that are less stiff. So it's the walls here are really going to bulge with excess fluid more than the walls here, because the walls here are less stiff. Okay, remember, it's all about mass and stiffness. This is the fact that this is why traveling waves caused by low frequencies activate the apex, because the basilar membrane has more mass and is less stiff, and lows resonate mass. Okay, now we're leaving that. We're talking about adding more fluid pressure, and it's going to bulge the apical basilar membrane and the apical Reissner's membrane more than those 2 membranes at the base of the cochlea. And that is why the hair cell, or the loss, I should say, will be seen more in the low frequencies and less in the high frequencies. Okay. What is it now? Presbycusis, noise-induced loss, Meniere's disease. Meniere's disease, I should say, is really weird. It's very, very episodic. The person feels it come on like an aura, like you're going to have a seizure. Oh no, I think I'm going to have another attack. Uh-oh. And the person hears a roaring tinnitus, a roaring sound in the ear. And the person gets rotary vertigo. And I don't mean a little bit dizzy. Puking his guts out, okay? And low frequency sensory neural loss. Those 3 things happen together in an episode that lasts for several hours, and then it goes away. And the hearing goes back to normal. And then a few weeks later, the person gets another attack. Oh, shoot. This time, when it passes, the person has a little bit of permanent low frequency loss. A few weeks later, he has another attack. And when it passes, he's left with a little bit more low frequency loss. And another attack, and he's left with a little more permanent low frequency loss. Until finally, after about a 5-year time span, the disease has run its course. And basically, you're left with a fairly flat, more low frequency than high, but basically a permanent low frequency hearing loss. Meniere's. Another pathology of the ear is tinnitus, ringing in the ear. Let's spell tinnitus together. Tinnitus. I don't say tinnitus because tinnitus sounds like an infection, okay? But tinnitus I prefer, but some say tomato, some say tomato. Whatever, doesn't matter. Ringing in the ear, very common, okay? Can't fix it with medicine. Don't ever buy the snake oils for sale on the drugstore shelves. Doesn't help. Okay, tinnitus isn't like that. Tinnitus is not otoacoustic emissions either. Tinnitus is not an objective sound that you can measure with a probe. It's not. It's a subjective sound. And what's it caused by? An imbalance of afferent and efferent hair cell information. And the brain doesn't know what to do with it. So the brain adds more gain to what it thinks should be there. The causes of tinnitus are whoppingly complex. You know what happens? People think about it, and they think about it, and they think about it, so it gets worse and worse and worse. The tinnitus is actually, you can think of it like the dripping of a faucet. How bad are you going to let it bug you? If you hear the kitchen faucet dripping and you're in the bedroom, how bad are you going to let it bug you? If you hear someone snoring across the hallway, how bad are you going to let it bug you? The snoring across the hallway may not even be all that loud, but the more you think about it, the more it bugs you. So the treatment for tinnitus is actually twofold. The treatments for tinnitus, and we'll describe more about tinnitus in other courses, okay? You're going to have a hearing course this summer called 125, Disorders. And we'll be covering lots of the stuff in disorders. We'll be covering Presbycusis, Noise-Induced, Meniere's, otitis media, all kinds of stuff, otosclerosis, all these pathologies we'll be covering in that course. So in this anatomy course, you're just sort of being introduced to it, but we'll be passing this way again, so don't freak, okay? But tinnitus, the approach to treating tinnitus is twofold. One is psychological, getting you to realize it's not dangerous. And once a doctor tests you and finds out it's not caused by a tumor, okay, if you can rule out an eighth nerve tumor, then you have nothing to worry about. Then your tinnitus is just a nuisance. So if you can think about it like this, you're stuck in traffic and you don't know why you're stuck. And you're sitting there now for 20 minutes and you haven't moved. Your whole heartbeat has gone up. You're really pissed off. And finally, you see the trucker beside you in his truck. And you step out of the car and you knock on his window, and he's higher up. So you're asking, can you see? What the heck is it? He's going, yeah, there's an accident up ahead. It's about a mile up ahead. There's a car turned over. The cops are there. We'll be, okay. Now you go back to your car, get on the phone, call your husband. Okay, I'm going to be blah, 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 blah. There's an accident on the I-40, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so there you go. Your whole heart, now you know the reason why. And with tinnitus, you often don't know the reason why, but hey, as long as you've ruled out anything dangerous, now it's just a nuisance. And then the second prong of treatment is, let's mask it with a little bit of noise. Well, what picks up noise? Hearing aids. They pick up background noise. So you wear hearing aids, and the background noise covers the tinnitus. When do people have most problem with tinnitus? When they're trying to sleep, because it's quiet. So put a fan on, put on an air conditioner, put a radio between stations, do whatever to cover the tinnitus. Don't make the cure worse than the disease, though. Okay, don't make the noise so loud that the noise is bothersome. But so you're going to learn a lot more about tinnitus in later courses. I think you're going to cover tinnitus actually in your oral rehabilitation and counseling course. I believe that's 260. I think in that course you cover tinnitus because that requires a lot of counseling. So here's another picture of some snake oil relief from tinnitus. Never buy it, never recommend it. Drugs won't help. Okay? The two-pronged approach is psychology and masking. You'll learn more about that later. Cochlear implants. Now have a look here. You're wearing something that's stuck like a magnet against your skin, okay? And basically, it's the transmitter. It's connected to wires that are sent into the round window of your cochlea. And they're snaked up into your scala tympani, not your scala media, scala tympani, because the round window is in contact with the scala tympani. The oval window is in contact with the scala vestibuli. So you want the electrode, the electrodes to touch the underside of the basilar membrane. Say this is the basilar membrane where my hand is, and all the hair cells are standing on top of here. Well, guess what? All the hair cells are dead. Okay? So if the basilar membrane is moving due to a traveling wave, it's going to activate these electrodes. And these electrodes are going to send an electrical message to your brain. So wherever a traveling wave is happening in your cochlea, you're stimulating those electrodes, and you're literally acting like a replacement of hair cells. Okay? You haven't got any more hair cells, but what are the inner hair cells attached to? The 8th nerve. Okay, so what you're doing is making it possible for the 8th nerve to get messages to send up to the brain. And you haven't got inner hair cells anymore to do it. A cochlear implant. Again, you've got a processor, you've got something you're wearing against the head, and electrodes are sent through and into the round window and coiled and snaked up into the cochlea. It acts as a replacement of inner hair cells. Inner hair cells are connected to the 8th nerve, and basically what this is doing is it's taking sound and it's converting it to electricity, so that electricity can be picked up by the 8th nerve. You're literally replacing hair cells. Cochlear implants are not for those with mild to moderate loss. Cochlear implants are intended for people who are as deaf as a post and they have no hearing. So hearing aids aren't going to help. Cochlear implants can improve your hearing all the way up to about a 30 decibel hearing loss. It's quite amazing. Let's look at your notes now. Okay, we'll finish. I got about 7 minutes here. So, cochlear disorders, pathology, always results in sensory neural loss, not reversible. Presbycusis, there you go, trouble hearing treble. You've got a few different types of presbycusis. Okay, sensory presbycusis is mild to moderate. It's associated mostly with outer hair cell damage, good speech recognition ability. Neural presbycusis is often more severe. Now you've got inner as well as outer hair cell damage, and your speech recognition ability is quite poor. Strial presbycusis is usually a fairly flat hearing loss, decent speech recognition. It's associated more with damage to the stria vascularis, and if you will recall, that's the blood supply to the hair cells. And if that's compromised, you're going to lose hair cells across the frequencies to a similar degree, which is why the hearing loss would be basically fairly flat. More common in women than in men. Mechanical hearing loss or presbycusis is deterioration of actual structures like the basilar membrane itself. And basically it encompasses sensory neural loss that doesn't fall into the above categories. This is why we say sensory neural for cochlear hair cell damage. Sensory refers to outer hair cell damage, neural refers to inner. Presbycusis and gender effects. Usually women have a flatter hearing loss. Older men tend to have better hearing in the lows, but worse hearing in the highs. Men's hearing loss tends to drop off more like a hill. Men have more of a steep sloped hearing loss because men have more often worked in noise. So they get a combination of presbycusis and noise-induced hearing loss. But they have better hearing in the lows because they often don't get strial presbycusis. Women are more susceptible to heart and stroke disease than men. Otherwise, men are the weaker sex because we die before women usually anyway. That's why there's way more widows walking around than widowers. I don't know how women ever let men take on the gender roles, because the female gender is superior to the male by far. Men die way earlier than women. Anyway, a little aside there. Noise-induced hearing loss. Okay? Rules for this, and you learned about this in 110. You learned about this in Unit 2, the decibel from hell. 85 to 90 dB for 8 hours straight can cause permanent noise-induced loss. When you increase that by 5, now your allowed time exposure gets cut in half, right? And if you increase it again by 5, you're cutting that in half again. So the rule cutoff generally is 85 to 90 dB SPL. And then if you increase the noise by 5 dB, your allowed time gets cut from 8 to 4 hours. Increase it by another 5, your allowed time is now 2 hours. Another 5, your allowed time is now 1 hour, and so on. Meniere's disease, the third one. Genetic, hereditary hearing loss. That's another one we didn't really cover, but some people are born with damaged hair cells. Genetically, hearing loss. Okay? Some people's mothers have had rubella. And if you've had rubella, if the mother is carrying German measles, rubella, she'll just get a mild sickness. The fetus, the baby, will often be born with a big hearing loss, hair cell damage. Okay? Weird but true. Okay, a summary of traveling wave physiology. I'm giving you this here to summarize everything that we've covered. Not the disorders. This just covers the stuff that we went all the way up through otoacoustic emissions. Stapes footplate rocks in the oval window, follows the frequency of the stimulus. Horizontal movement, oval window, paralymph, round window simply allows transverse movement to occur, which builds up pressure in the scala vestibuli and scala tympani. That's the horizontal movement, back and forth. Pushing in the oval window, the round window now bulges. So if the oval window dents in, the round window bulges. And what allows that to happen is the helicotrema, la, 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 la. Okay, that little curve around the tip at the apex of the cochlea. The vertical movement is caused because of pressure changes in the scala vestibuli and tympani. The scala media moves up and down because the cochlea gets narrower toward the helicotrema. So a pushing of the fluid through the oval window is going to cause a pressure buildup. And that pressure buildup is going to indent the scala media near the base of the cochlea if it's a high frequency sound, and it will indent the scala media near the apex of the cochlea if it's a low frequency sound. The traveling wave moves from base to apex. It basically grows and slows as it goes. There you go. It grows and slows as it goes until it reaches its final peak and stopping place at some unique place along the basilar membrane. As I say, a high frequency sound, the traveling wave will stop near the base because of the mass and stiffness properties of the basilar membrane. If a low frequency sound activates the cochlea, the traveling wave will move past the base and will stop near the apex, and it'll find its resting place there. Okay, traveling wave only reaches a peak because it finally meets and slows down. Okay, it's like me throwing a snowball against a house. The snowball is going to stay together until it hits the house. Okay, when a traveling wave is running into impedance as it runs up the cochlea, and it's going to stop and peak at some unique place in the basilar membrane. The peak is where the hair cells get sheared or bent. Outer hair cells change the mechanical vibrational properties of the basilar membrane on either side of the peak to push it into a point, and that sharpens it. The cochlea is an amplifier, especially the outer hair cells, and it distorts like every other amplifier does. And what do you get? Otoacoustic emissions. Hearing aids are also amplifiers, and they distort. And next year, you'll be learning about ANSI testing, American National Standards Institute testing on hearing aids. And one of the things you're going to be testing on hearing aids is their harmonic distortion. Because they amplify, they distort. All amplifiers distort. The cochlea is no exception. It's an amplifier, and it amplifies what? Soft sounds below 50 dB. It amplifies and sharpens the traveling wave. And because it's doing that, the outer hair cells are doing that, it's going to produce a distortion. And that distortion is OAEs. All right. Stop sharing. Now, what are we doing next week? We're all done the cochlea. I think we spent 6 weeks on the cochlea, at least 2 weeks in anatomy, and I believe 4 weeks in physiology. So we just covered this cochlea well. I hope you're not watching this session before you've watched the other cochlear section or sessions. But at any rate, next week we move to the 8th nerve. We talk about retrocochlear anatomy and physiology. We're going to cover the 8th nerve, and then later on we will move up to the brain stem. And we'll look a little bit at that. We'll also look a little bit at pathology of the 8th nerve, which is a retrocochlear pathology. Retrocochlear means behind the cochlea. Retro means back, okay? So we've covered outer ear, middle ear, inner ear. Retrocochlear is next, and that's it. Your semester is rapidly winding. I believe middle of May you're done. You've got exams. We are ahead of time in anatomy class. We will be done before your final exams. I'll bet you 2 weeks before your final. So at any rate, next week we will cover the 8th nerve, and the week after we'll be looking at the brain stem, and the week after we'll be looking at brain stem and brain. Okay, and then you're basically finished. All right, if giving you an overview here, I will stop the session, stop recording now, and sign off. Adios, live long and prosper.